Hi students, this is the lecture for Chapter 9, Language Development. The objectives that we are going to work to cover here include a definition of what language is. We will talk briefly about the 4 different areas of language development. Then we'll focus more on how children learn words. The last part of the lecture will look to differentiate between the 4 theories of language development. To get the class started, my TA Ray is going to lead a discussion answering these 5 questions. All of them relate to the major question of what is language. If you have a minute, try to answer these questions on your own and then listen along in the class discussion.
So what is communication? Anyone?
Relaying information.
Say that again?
Relaying information between
Yeah.
each other.
Anyone else have anything to add?
Expression.
I can't hear you. I'm sorry.
Expression.
Okay, yeah, sure. All right, so the definition of communication, Kristen hit it pretty much on the head. Oh, Liz, sorry.
Okay.
You're not Kristen.
It's okay.
Kristen behind you.
Sorry.
So the definition is a process by which we assign and convey meaning in an attempt to create a shared understanding. And this process requires a huge database of intrapersonal and interpersonal skills, listening, observing, speaking, questioning, analyzing, evaluating, all of that. But the most important part, and you guys might want to write this down, is it involves something that is imparted, something that is interchanged, or something that is transmitted. So in one way or another, you're getting your point across, and the person that you're trying to get your point across to understands.
You're communicating very well.
Why, thanks. All right, so next, what's speech?
The vocal way of communicating.
Very good. Anyone else have anything else to add?
Verbal.
Okay, so the definition of speech is the facility or power of speaking. Oral communication, ability to express one's thoughts and emotions by speech, sounds, and I heard you guys mention it over here, gestures. You know, I'm Puerto Rican. We talk with our hands a lot, you know, and that means just as much as what we say to each other verbally.
That's really a new piece of the definition though. So for a long time, the gestures weren't considered part of speech, but we've been including that now in the definition more recently.
So is it like would sign language be?
Yes. So
Sign language is speech.
sign language is the speech for somebody who's
Okay.
using sign. Yep.
All right, the third one, what's language? And we're not going to cover this one too much because Dr. Fleck is going to go over it with you in more detail. What's language?
Method of communication.
Sure.
Like something to do with cultural.
Sure. Yeah, for sure. Anyone else have anything else to add? All right, so the definition of language is any set or system of symbols used in a uniform fashion, or the rules of using something by any number of people who are thus enabled to communicate intelligibly with one another. So we can all communicate with each other through language. What do you guys think about animals? Do animals have language?
Yeah, I would say.
Okay. Why? How do you know this? Okay.
If a dog's mad, they growl at each other.
Sure. Alex?
Because they have like a uniform way of doing it across like species. like they all know how to communicate with the same species as them.
Okay. Those are all great. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh.
Did you have something to add?
Yeah, well, just like how you were saying, how do you know? It's like a lot of animals will travel in families or packs. So you know, like, they have to communicate or have, like, a language somehow, so they all
Right.
go together.
There is one. Oh, go ahead, Kenny. Sorry.
Can't they, no, sorry, I don't know. Can't they only say like one thing to each other though? So it's not like, in other words, if there was a lion coming and to eat one of them and there was some food over here, they couldn't communicate both of those. They'd only be able to spit one out.
Yeah.
If I'm correct.
And that's the difference. No, okay. That's the difference. They really don't have language. They have good skills of communication. And those skills of communication are set. When I take my dog for a walk through an open space, and all the little prairie dogs are standing outside of their, burrows or furrows or whatever they're called, holes. They squeak, and then they all go underground. They have a set response, so that set squeak sets off a set response. One of them can say, and this is the difference between us and them, what we can do and what they can't do, is one of those prairie dogs can arbitrarily say, well, hey, I don't want to go underground, I want to check out the dog, or something like that. We have the ability to make up responses, make up sentences out of nowhere, like the polka-dotted turquoise monkey plays handball with hard-boiled eggs. We have that ability, and that's what sets us apart from other animals. Now, there are studies that some animals may have some form of communication, but what they're finding, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Fleck, what they're finding is that most of the responses are the same, except for with dolphins. They're finding different patterns of responses with dolphins. So dolphins may have a way to do what we can do. So who knows?
That's the one animal, body of research so far coming from animals that's suggesting that they can generate based on rules the way that we can.
Oh, cool, actually. Thanks for all the fish, if any of you guys get the reference. Anyway, go ahead.
I think it was my cognitive film. One of my other classes, we watched a video on, they're now saying that gorillas can communicate better. There was a study that they can use this board and they can do sign language and put sentences together now.
There's nothing really definitive on the research on monkeys. I don't think they've discovered that they can put together sentences, but if they're taught sign language, they can definitely communicate a feeling. I'm hungry, give me that, things like that. But they can't say, I'm hungry, so I want you to make me a hamburger.
Right.
It's still a set number.
Okay.
Yeah. So they have the sign language abilities, they can do pointing and they can do boards, but it's very limited and it never escalates further than what they've practiced. Yeah. Did you have a question?
That's what I was going to ask.
Yep.
Okay, so the next one. Is it okay to move on, guys? Okay. How is language learned? And actually, this is the one that Dr. Fleck is going to go more into with you guys.
It's your surroundings, your culture, it's both nature and nurture. So
Sure.
practice reading, just doing different things with language.
Yeah, for sure. The way, and this goes along with metalinguistic awareness. Now that we have some ideas of what language is, we know what it is and what it isn't. And so that's how kids learn language. They know what it is and what it isn't. They know that a group of sounds will make up a word, and a group of words will make up a sentence, which will help them to communicates something that they want. So, that being said, what do you think is the role of cognition in language development? There's one guy who was really big into language development with kids. Or cognition, you got it, Vygotsky. If you remember, Vygotsky said that thought and language were super intertwined. So on one side, just like my analogy of the twist tie, on one side you got your thoughts, on the other side you got language, and once you start to develop language, it starts to become so intertwined with your thoughts that the more they become intertwined, the stronger your language skills become, and the more you're able to express your thoughts.
It mirrors the cognitive skills too. Sorry to interrupt you. So not only is it expressing thought that becomes better, but the thoughts themselves are more advanced. It's more higher order thinking.
And to answer your question, if you can have thoughts without language, you can definitely have thoughts without language, but this is one of the reasons why little kids don't remember, because they don't have language skills yet to be able to classify those memories, those thoughts, and store them.
And then pull them out. Yeah, it's an encoding process.
Right. We go here first, and I'll come to you, Alex.
You don't have a language, but you can have thoughts. Do you understand your thoughts then? Or is it just kind of like noise?
That's a good question. I would think that there would be maybe some understanding, but I would think that there would also be some noise.
So that's an awesome question, and that's why language is so important, and why we're going to spend a whole week looking at it. So I'm glad that you asked that. Theorists would say that without language, we don't have complex mental activities. We don't have the same cognitive skills. So there's a lot of noise in there. Yeah. Now, not everybody would agree, right? But some of our major cognitive theorists that we study in here do say that. Yeah.
Did you have something you want to add,
I was
Alex?
going to ask the same basic question. So.
Good.
Okay, sweet. All right. So now that we've covered this stuff, let's break down language just a little bit more. There are 4 parts of language, 4 different components of language. Can any of you guys tell me what those are? Tyler, phonology, I heard it over here somewhere. Syntax, semantics. Grammar and syntax are the same thing. Phonology. Morphology we don't cover.
It's
Right?
part of
It's-
phonology. Yeah,
yeah.
it's part of this first one.
So I heard pragmatics, phonology, semantics, and syntax.
Grammar.
Grammar's the same thing as syntax.
Okay.
All right, so you guys are right on. So phonology. Phonology are the rules about structure and sequence of speech and sounds. So this is our rules. We know how the words are supposed to sound. We know what the words are supposed to look like. But does anyone here speak a foreign language? What language?
Spanish.
Spanish? Okay. Are you pretty fluent?
Yeah, I speak more than I like to say, I think.
Okay. Describe your lunch for us.
So hoy ya comiste cosa con pollo, agua, ya tener poquito salchicha y ya tener una soda para beber.
Muy sabroso.
Porque mi sobrino no está.
Ah, qué bueno. Okay, so how did that sound to you? those of you who don't know Spanish, could you tell where one word stopped and one word started? Was it difficult to, because, you know, I understood it, her lunch sounded really good, actually. But that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about our rules. In Spanish, as well as many other languages, there are rules as to how the sentences are formed. Verb comes before the noun. In Spanish, a lot of times it's reversed. The noun comes before the verb. You know, things like that. So that's what we're talking about.
Let me interrupt you just quickly. That's getting into a little bit of the grammar.
Right.
The way that the rules are, the words are put into the sentences. I would say that's a little bit more grammar. But here, the sounds that you make within each language would be what we classify here. So there are different, like you roll your R's in Spanish,
Yeah.
right? That sounds in some pieces. That's not part of the English language.
It's a double L, right?
Double L
Yeah.
is a Y sound
Mhm.
instead. Yeah.
So learning how to make those sounds with our mouth, and then where they fit and how they fit into the words, and then how we put all those words together. So when I listen to someone speaking Spanish, I have a real hard time knowing when one word ends and the next one begins, or when a sentence stops, or I don't know what's going on. And so that's part of this piece of language.
Unless, of course, you're watching Mexican novellas. Because then the gestures say it all.
Soap operas?
Soap operas, yeah.
Yeah. I used to watch that with my Colombian friends, and I always knew what was happening. And I don't speak
And
any Spanish.
That's
I would
how. That's
talk-
one of the ways that I try to learn as well.
Her
It's
mom would always
constantly.
laugh at me. She'd be like, "How do you know that?" I'm like, it's
Yeah, you can
obvious,
tell.
you know. I'm a genius.
All right, so the next one is semantics. And semantics is the vocabulary, the way concepts are expressed through words and word combinations. That's like saying, you know, when I say chalkboard, you guys know that this is the chalkboard, that the desk is not the chalkboard. That's this. And the next one is syntax. And syntax, like I said earlier, you guys said the same, is the same as grammar, pretty much. It's the rules used to put those words into sentences. And that's what I was jumping the gun a little bit with, where, you know, in English, the verb comes before the noun. In Spanish and a lot of other languages, that usually the noun comes before the verb. Kenny?
So that would be more, phonology would be more like, usually if a vowel is followed by another vowel, it's a long vowel.
Mhm.
So that would be more phonology, right?
Yep, and the
Based on
actual
word sound
sound.
to that.
Yep, and the actual
Um,
sound being made.
As opposed to it's followed by a consonant.
Correct. So the actual word order is more of a syntax issue.
Right?
Okay, and
Yeah.
okay.
Mhm.
So with the Spanish, where the noun coming before the adjective, that would be a syntactical.
Yep.
So
I
that'll-
think of like phonology, like a phone,
Yeah.
like, or like it's like the T says t.
Yep. Phonics. Hooked on phonics.
Yeah.
The structure and the
Sounding it
definition
out.
Exactly.
throws it off a little bit, I think.
Yep.
So I have a question, like on the Spanish, would the phonology be like the differences between nosotros and vámonos and vas y voy?
No.
Would that be the difference? Because they're different, because it's one verb, but they change depending on who you're speaking
Who you're
to.
talking to.
So it's I or you or you.
It's more just about the sounds that are coming.
Right. Right. That
Just
what you're talking about is the syntax.
Okay, so that's still considered syntax.
Mhm.
Yeah. Another example for phonology is when kids learn to spell. You know, they have to first learn that the C is a K and the A is an A and the T is a T to get the word cat.
I like your question though in your example because it shows how all of these parts are interrelated, right? Because that sound change does change the meaning, which is semantics, which is dictated by the syntax, the way that you're putting this word in order, what you're ending it with.
Okay.
So it shows nicely how all of these things fit into one.
And the last one is is pragmatics. And these are the conventions and strategies used in effective and socially acceptable verbal interactions. So these are the rules for engaging each other appropriately. These are things that are learned by your culture. So if I were to come up to you and talk this close to you, hi Tess. You know, a lot of us in the US would kind of back away because that's not what we're used to. What we're used to is arms length. You know, don't come any closer unless I want you to. But in other cultures, that's different. You know, and when I go to Puerto Rico to visit my grandma, we're all up in each other's face. You know, and that's not uncommon. You know, we talk loud, we're in each other's faces, but we love each other. You know, so that the pragmatics are the stuff that you learn culturally about what is socially acceptable in your language. So now we're going to get to the YouTube question, or the YouTube video.
So what I want to do next is talk a little bit more specifically about how children learn words, so semantic development. And I wish we had time to go over the development of all 4 areas, but we're going to focus here just on semantics. And the reason that we're going to focus on the semantics is because this is the one that's most often assessed in school settings, right? So in school settings, we often will have our students giving spelling and vocabulary tests, right? And so we use this as a measure of their cognitive development. And we really stress semantic development all the way, you know, from preschool through high school. So we'll spend a little bit of time talking together about how children actually learn words. Okay? The rate of word growth, so word growth being how many words they learn per year, is pretty amazing. So I have some numbers in front of me from a typical developmental trend. So in 2nd grade, children have about 14,000 words that they've learned. And when you look at this in preschool, it comes down to about 12 to 14 new words a day. Isn't that nuts? So it starts to slow down a little bit. In preschool, you see a huge growth in words. Could you imagine as an adult learning 14 new words a day? It would be awesome, but we just don't have that kind of vocabulary growth as adults. So that's a big feat.
I have a question on that, because
Sure.
we say that as adults. However, that's how I learned my Spanish.
No, yeah,
Right.
if you're learning another language, you are showing.
So it would
growth.
just be more of a new language.
Yep, because it's a new language, definitely.
But that's because we're not trying, though.
Right, in preschool, I wouldn't say they're not trying,
Adults.
but the adult is actively studying a foreign language to learn it.
Well, but you said learning 14 new words a day, right? So we're not trying to learn 14 new
No,
words, nor do we have
no.
the exposure to unknown words
Yeah,
that we're
and you
comfortable
probably
with.
could, but some of those, and some studies have been done where they do like the word a day kind of things, like where the calendar shows you a new
Yeah.
word. And as adults, we just don't have great recollection for those. We don't learn them very well. And it's really because they're complicated and they're long, big words, because they have to be new to our vocabulary.
I was just going to say, like, when you're younger, the words have a lot of context in your environments, and the words we would be learning are like things that you don't see
You
every
don't
day.
hear, they're not part of our everyday, conversation. And that is exactly, we're gonna get to that, because that is really how they do this. Yeah.
So do we still have the same capability as younger kids to acquire the same?
Great
number of words,
question.
Or is it just?
I think that we do. I think that we do have the same capability. And I think there are definitely people that would argue that we don't. So people who adhere to the sensitive period for language development would say that after a particular point, our ability would decrease. But I wouldn't go down that route so much. Yeah, Tess?
I think you could learn them as long as you were able to include them.
Be surrounded by them.
Like if you
Yeah.
didn't just like look at the word and read the definition, and all day you tried to use the word so
Right.
that you could.
If you're in
remember
another
the-
country and you have to speak that language, and those are the words being used. Yeah, immersion, yeah. So second grade, about 14,000 words. By 8th grade, you're at about 50,000 words. 12th grade, 80,000 words. And we really do see that start to plateau, though, and it's plateauing as the student is aging. Okay. So complete these proverbs for me. This is a fun little activity. A rolling stone gathers no moss, yeah. How about this one? Blank flock together.
Birds of a feather flock together.
Birds of a feather. Don't put
All your eggs.
all your eggs in one basket. Rome was
Spilt
not. Oh, it's no use crying over spilt milk. Yeah. Rome was not
Built in a day.
built in a day. And the last one?
You're out of your mind.
What it is? What is that?
Out of sight. I like Jimmy's better though.
Yeah.
Okay, so these are proverbs. When I was a little kid, my grandmother, my brother was playing with all of his friends, and my grandmother said to me, "Do you feel like a fifth wheel?" And I looked at her like she had like 4 heads. I had no idea what she was talking about. So what does this one mean? Birds of a feather flock together. What does that mean?
Like people stick together.
Yeah, so people find each other, like characteristics. Like people stick together. You find people that have similar characteristics to you. How about Rome was not built in a day? What does that mean?
Things take time.
Patience, things take time, especially great things. So we understand these as adults, okay? And this is part of semantics. It's not just the word, but it's the words together that give us a certain meaning. What do you think a 5-year-old thinks about these? So if you told a 5-year-old birds of a feather flock together, what does that mean?
Just fun to say.
It's fun to say, yeah.
Thinking about a bunch of birds.
And they think about a bunch of birds, yeah. So all the ducks hang out together. Okay?
Right.
And all the geese hang out together, which they actually do. Yeah. How about Rome was not built in a day? What does the 5-year-old say?
It took them more than 1 day to build it.
Yeah, it took more than 1 day, or where's Rome? But it takes a long time to build a city. Yeah. Which is not completely inaccurate, right? But it's not the meaning that we attach to these proverbs. So this is a good example of one of the developmental trends that we see in the way that children learn words and word meanings. So research has shown that children understand literal speech or literal words before they come to understand the figurative. Okay? And the figurative are those like the proverbs, the things that are communicating a meaning beyond just what the actual word is, through the pairing of the words, the message, the actual meaning behind it. So young children, they're going to learn the literal speech, the literal words before the figurative speech. And that makes sense. And I want you to tell me why it makes sense based on a cognitive developmental theory. Alex?
Because they can relate it to something they see around them.
Yeah, it's real. It's something that they see around them and something that they understand. So all we're seeing here is that language development is mirroring cognitive development, right? So children in Piaget's theory, for example, in sensory motor, everything is outside. It's sensation and perception. And as they age into formal operations, it goes into the mind. It becomes abstract. And that's what's happening here too. Another developmental trend that we have is that lexical words precede grammatical words. And here we have the same exact thing happening. It's mirroring cognitive development. So our lexical words represent physical, social, psychological, so things like horse, swim, pretty. Words that they understand, that have something concrete to them in their environment, and that they're exposed to. The grammatical words will affect the meaning of those words. So before, have, after. And the development of those words and understanding of those meanings comes later. And we see this in their speech. So remember, speech is different than language. And in their speech, they will often leave out these grammatical words when they're making sentences. They'll string together the basics, but leave out the grammaticals. It's oleographic speech. Again, it's just mirroring their cognitive development, and that's why this is so important for us as teachers, because language is this key cognitive tool, and that's what Vygotsky tells us, and it gives us insight into their cognitive abilities. Okay. The last developmental trend that we have is that children continue to refine their understanding of lexical words, so their speech is going to grow, their vocabulary is going to grow, but they show some common errors. So under generalization and overgeneralization, and your textbook actually uses different words. Does anybody have the words that your text has?
Extension.
Extension, yeah, under extension and overextension. They're really the same thing. Now, I understand that on the quiz, I think I had these. Yeah, so I'm going to send an email correcting that and giving you guys some points back, because I didn't recognize the discrepancy there, and I want it to be clear. But what's most important, right, isn't those quiz points, but it's knowing what these two things are. Yeah, Kenny.
You said overgeneralization, but it says overregulation. Is that overregularization? Is that typo or?
That's a typo, yeah.
Okay, so it should be, all right.
Yeah,
Cool,
we're
I just
going to
wanna make
go,
sure,
so when I send you the email and the book, we're going to go with the book's words. This came from a cognitive development text, so it should be more clear. Let's go with under extension. Is that what it is? Yeah, thank you. Under extension and over extension. Okay. So what is under extension?
It's too restrictive.
The meaning is too restricted. And over extension, the meaning is too broad. So we can think of the example that I gave you for Piaget when we talked about the 3-year-old who was developing the scheme for bear and dog, because that's a great example of this. So at first, we have a basic scheme for a dog, and if I encounter anything in my environment that's similar to that, I'm going to say it's a dog. Right? So I'm using a word and attaching meaning to it when it's too broad. Not everything that I encounter that's hairy and has 4 legs is a dog. Now you'll also see children do the opposite, where they think that the only thing that's a dog is their dog. It's Sam the dog or whatever. And you'll see this with their toys too. And I think the example that I used in the quiz was a ball with a star on it. That's the only thing that's a ball. Nothing else is a ball. They're really just trying to figure out what the word means and how best to use it, the appropriate use of that word. Okay, so those are 2 common errors that you will see children show in their learning of words and their semantics. So look for that email though for clarity, because that'll come shortly. So I want you to try something out for me. I like to put you guys into the perspective of young children. So give this a go. Here's a paragraph here. I want you to read this. And then with the neighbors who are sitting near you, see if you can answer some of these questions. So take just a couple set of minutes to try this. So as I mentioned here in the lecture, go ahead and try to read this paragraph. You might want to press pause. See if you can answer the questions. And pay attention to question 1 and 2 on the right-hand side of the screen as well. Understand what this paragraph is saying, 1 to 10.
That word's not in there.
1.
A 1? You don't get any of it?
5.
I get all of it.
She gets it.
Now, in terms of like, am I supposed to translate this into like regular English?
Well, that's this. Do you know the definitions for each of these words?
Then
No.
I'm gonna go down to a 2.
Yeah, but do you know, overall, can you get a feel for what's going on here?
Yeah.
Well, you
Okay,
can answer
so
all the questions easily.
When did this story take place?
Last Saturday.
Last Cerny, absolutely. Great job. Who was with Fleegeldobie?
Privet.
Bribben was, absolutely. Where were they?
Nerdling.
One of my favorite places to hang out.
Uh,
What were they shepherding?
Whoopie cables.
Yeah. And what were they cleaning?
Burley grass.
Burley
Yeah,
grass.
absolutely. You guys are doing great. What kind of strezzle was
A
it?
ditty straddle.
It was a ditty one, yeah. Was it ribbon chief?
The ditty strezzle is tooted in your grunt.
You did it! Yeah, you really chiefed it. Okay, so what's the point? What does this mean?
We understand the structure of a sentence.
You're using the structure of the sentence to help you understand what's going on here. Now, you don't get every single definition, but you do get some meaning. You know that last Cerny is a reference to time, right? Maybe a day, something like that, or a week. Okay. You know that
Those are names.
you know that those are names, that those are nouns, those are people, or some kind of creature. Where were they? They were in the Nerdlink. You know that that's a place. Through one exposure to these strange words, you have gained some meaning. Okay? Now, you don't know exactly the perfect translation here if you were to translate it into English, but you're still coming to some good conclusions here.
So does that kind of show how syntax and semantics are related because you're using the syntactic ways to...
They absolutely are. Yep, you're using your syntax to help you understand word meaning. And we call that semantic bootstrapping, and that's in your text. Yeah. This is also demonstrating here how important the context is and how children use the context to help them learn what the words are. So it's a process of fast mapping. And this is what Alex had gotten at just a minute ago. You only need to be exposed to each word once or twice if it's in the right context to help you learn what that word is. Okay? It's fast mapping. It's an absolutely amazing process. And little children are doing this all the time, naturally. So you infer the word's meaning after one or two very simple exposures. And there are things that happen in the context that help us learn the meaning. So all but one. So all of the things in the environment are the same but one. And I don't know that definition or that word, but now I can infer it because I know everything else. Pointing. When people are pointing, it really does help with children's vocabulary. Use of articles. So this is of all. The of would be the article, and it's indicating to me what it is. And that's part of the sentence structure that's helping us and helping the kids learn. The context is really important here. We also use defining and correlational features. That's more of a complex skill, but really what I'm saying here is you're comparing and contrasting this new word or this new concept with other things in the environment. So all of these things are similar, all of these things are different, and I'm comparing and contrasting to infer what something might be. So you guys did this, just like young children learn new words, you were able to learn some of those words in that silly paragraph. Okay. Has anyone, do you remember that commercial? I tried to find it on YouTube, but it wasn't there, where the woman is folding a pair of pants in the laundromat, and she's going, pants, pants, these are yellow pants. And she looks like she's nuts. And then she puts the pants down, and there's a little infant in a car seat sitting there looking at her. Yeah. So exposure to language, labeling, and doing things like that is going to help that child with this. It's going to be fast mapping. They're going to hear it that one time, I mean, not as a little baby, but as a toddler and preschooler, and they're going to infer the meaning. So, how do we promote semantic development in our students? We want to talk regularly to, with, and around infants and toddlers. Okay, so we're exposing them to a rich language environment, providing definitions of concepts. We can tell them what things mean. And then on top of that, a more metacognitive strategy would be have them tell us what they think it means. And then, of course, we correct and work with them on the definition. Using the vocabulary in a variety of contexts to help children, providing examples and non-examples will be helpful. Providing feedback when children use words incorrectly, and then also encouraging children to read as much as possible. So that body of literature on exposure to reading is very definitive. There are no questions about it. The more children are exposed to literature, the better their language skills are. And that's including writing as well. So reading to children when they're young, and then encouraging them to read as much as they can is going to be helpful for not only their semantic development, but their meta-linguistic development and their overall language skills. So I have a short quiz in front of you. We've got about 5 minutes here. It should only take you a few to get through this, but we're going to use this as our tool to help us talk about the theories of language development. So this isn't graded or anything. This is just a tool to help you give it a shot, and then we'll just go over each of the answers, and that will point you in the right direction as to the 4 different theories of language development. Here are the questions that the students are working on. There are 4 questions. I would press pause on each one of these slides and see if you can answer the questions before listening to the class discussion. Like a good handful of you have gotten through this. So this was just for practice. These 4 theories of language development or language acquisition are still, I would say 3 out of 4 of them are still hotly debated in this field. Okay? So as we talk about them briefly, think about which one might resonate with you the most. So the first one, which of the following statements is consistent with B.F. Skinner's view of language development? What did you think? A, B, C, or D? A, absolutely. Yeah, language is learned response based on reinforcement. So to foster children's language development, parents and other adults praise them first for making speech-like sounds, and then later saying words, and still later forming sentences. So behaviorism is going to be our topic for next week. And so that will lead you to this. So basically it's a set of learned responses. Just like with the animal research, the research with primates, a set of learned responses because you're reinforced for making that sound or saying that word. How about the second one? Which of the following statements is consistent with a nativist view? A, B, C, or D?
Louder.
Yeah, you guys got it. A, the nativist view. So language is built in, it's an innate skill. Noam Chomsky proposed the language acquisition device and universal grammar. So he says that this is something that we're born with. Okay? And other theorists agree with him. Steven Pinker's a linguist, and I really appreciate Pinker's view. He says that language is an instinct, and that we have an instinct for language because we're human. Just like spiders have an instinct to spin webs, humans have an instinct for speech, for language. Okay. So here, A, although children can learn the specific vocabulary and syntax of their native language only by hearing the people around them, they seem to have some built-in knowledge of the form that any language should take. How about the next one, number 3? Which of the following statements is consistent with a functionalist view? D. I couldn't hear you. Yeah, D. So the functionalist view is that language enhances our effectiveness in social groups to satisfy our own needs. So I would say out of the 4 perspectives, this is probably the perspective that's most outdated. So that doesn't seem to be part of the major debate anymore. And what they're saying here is that children initially use language for their own interactions with other people, but they use it to help them think. No, I'm sorry. It's D. I was jumping ahead. From a very early age, children are motivated to learn how to speak because speech enables them to interact with other people and ultimately get what they want. Okay, so it serves a function. The language serves a function for the child. And so then the last one is the last one that's left. What's consistent with the sociocultural view? B, absolutely. So here we have children using language primarily for their interactions with other people, and then using it to think more effectively. This is where Vygotsky would come in, and the sociocultural view. Okay, so language would be the key cognitive tool here, and it really stresses the importance of language and how it mirrors cognitive skills. So think here about which one of these theorists for language acquisition resonates with you. I would say for myself, the sociocultural view is one that I adhere to most. Okay? But there's a lot of research for the nativist view and even the behaviorist view. All right, so here's what we covered. Here's what we didn't cover for today. The definition of language, the 4 parts. We did a little semantic development, and we differentiated between those 4 theories. Okay? So here's the summary for this lecture. We worked to define language. Language is 4 parts, and we worked a little bit more in depth on semantic development. The last part of the lecture looked to differentiate between the 4 theories of language development. Don't forget the things that we did not cover, as you want to revisit those in your reading and your studies.